Hi, I'm Altha. I'm a mother, a widow, and apparently the last to know I'd been written out of my own family's future. My son altered my will. His wife sold my house. They told people I'd moved into a nursing home. But here's the thing, I never signed a single thing. So how did they manage to steal everything without me noticing? And more importantly, why did no one in my family speak up? It started with a phone call, one of those that drop like a stone into still water. I was watering the potted ferns on my back porch when my cell buzzed, and seeing Lowell's name didn't give me any warning. We usually spoke twice a year, once around tax season, and once when he sent me Christmas cookies from his wife's bakery. "Altha," he said, his voice a shade more formal than usual. "I need to ask you something. Did you recently update your will?" My hands went still. "No," I said slowly, watching water dribble onto the patio slab. "Why?" "I have a document here, filed through a third-party courier. It bears your name and signature, but something about it felt off. I thought I'd check with you before moving forward." "Send it to me," I said. My voice was even, but my fingers curled tightly around the hose. "Now." He did. And by late afternoon, I was staring at a PDF that looked like a shadow of my own life. Page 3 stopped me cold. My name, Altha Marie Blake, had been spelled incorrectly. They'd written Alta, one small typo, but it cracked the facade wide open. I'd spent 30 years as a professional bookkeeper before retiring. I don't misspell my own name. I don't sign anything I haven't triple-checked. And this? I hadn't signed this. Lowell's reply to my email came back quick. "We'll keep this confidential for now. I'd recommend checking with your bank. There may be related authorizations. Quietly, Altha." Quietly. As if betrayal should be handled like fine china. The next morning, I went to my credit union. The branch manager still remembered me from when Ruben and I first opened our joint account 25 years ago. The teller smiled when I stepped up to the counter. "Back so soon?" she said cheerfully. "Weren't you in just a few weeks ago with your son?" I blinked. "Excuse me?" "Last month," she said, slowing down. "You and Mr. Blake came in to authorize a transfer. I assumed it was you." I asked for the authorization log. I asked to see the signature card. She hesitated, then quietly pulled the file. My hands didn't shake as I looked it over, but inside I was crumbling. My signature was there. My name. But the strokes were wrong. The M curved differently. The loop in the B wasn't mine. And the signature line was marked Power of Attorney, Active. I wasn't there. I never signed it. And yet, according to that paper, I'd handed over control of my finances to my son. I walked out of the bank like someone underwater. It was a sunny day in Austin, but nothing felt warm. My car felt too small, the air too thick. I sat in the driver's seat and stared at the wheel for what might have been 5 minutes or 20. I'd raised Gannon mostly alone after Ruben passed, paid off his college loans when he couldn't, took in his dog when he moved into an apartment that didn't allow pets. He was my only child, and somewhere along the way, he'd decided that wasn't enough. Not enough to love, not enough to respect, not even enough to ask. My heart didn't break. It stiffened, hardened. By the time I pulled into my driveway, the sun had started to dip behind the pecan tree in my yard. I stepped inside, locked the door behind me, and went straight for the old safe in the coat closet. The combination was still Ruben's birthday. Inside, tucked beneath old tax returns and a velvet box holding his wedding band, was our original will. The one we'd signed together 10 years ago. The one witnessed by our friend Elaine, notarized at the law office we trusted. I held the thick paper in my hands, ran my fingers across Ruben's signature, and then mine. "I never signed anything else," I said out loud. My voice sounded strange in the stillness, stronger than I expected. Then I picked up my phone and called Lowell. "We need to meet," I told him, "and bring copies." I didn't sleep much the night after my meeting with Lowell. My mind kept circling that misspelled name, that forged signature. It felt like a hole had opened beneath my feet, and I couldn't find solid ground to step on. By morning, I was sitting at my kitchen table with a fresh legal pad, listing every document I'd signed in the past year. One in particular started to itch at the back of my brain. The care agreement. Months ago, Milas had come over with a plate of those lemon cookies she knew I liked, the soft ones with powdered sugar on top. She and Gannon were both unusually cheerful that day, buzzing around the kitchen like two teenagers trying to impress a chaperone. Gannon brought out a manila folder, told me they'd been working with a senior care consultant on best practices for long-term planning. "It's just precautionary," he said, "in case anything happens, like a medical emergency. You know, like a safety net." I was focused on the cookies, on how tired I'd been from organizing the garage earlier that week. They said the paperwork just needed my signature to acknowledge receipt and consent. Nothing binding, nothing complicated. I should have read it line by line. Instead, I skimmed the first paragraph, saw words like family, health directives, temporary authority, and signed. Malise smiled wide and said, "Let's take a picture. First step toward building our safety plan." She positioned us together on the couch, held up her phone, and snapped a selfie. I smiled too, unaware Gannon, just over her shoulder, gave her a quick nod, almost imperceptible, just as the camera clicked. That memory returned to me like a brick to the chest as I sat in Lowell's office. He adjusted his glasses, flipping through the pages of the document I'd dug out of my files that morning. "This is not a basic care acknowledgement, Altha," he said. "See this clause here? Section C12? It says, under certain emotional or medical duress conditions, you authorize your agents, namely Gannon and Malis, to act on your behalf, including in matters related to estate management." My throat went dry. "But they said—" "They told you it was non-binding," Lowell finished for me. "And you believed them." The silence between us wasn't heavy. It was surgical. "I didn't just hand them the key," I said slowly. "I gave them the whole lock." When I got home, I went straight to my laptop. I hadn't looked through my home security footage archives in months, but that day had stuck in my head, because Malis wore a bright blue cardigan and Gannon had worn a Baylor sweatshirt I'd given him on his birthday. I scrolled until I found the right day. There they were, at my front door, carrying cookies and a folder. Watching it now, I noticed details I hadn't seen before. How Malis placed the cookies just where I'd sit, how Gannon positioned the papers facing me, how he opened them to the exact page they wanted me to sign. I watched myself sign. I watched Malis's grin widen, and then I saw it, clear as day, Gannon glancing toward her with that same quick nod. Her mouth moved, barely a whisper. Done. It didn't feel like a betrayal shouted from rooftops. It felt like poison slipped into tea. I hit pause, rewound, watched it again. Each time, it felt worse. Not because they fooled me, but because they didn't hesitate. There was no nervousness, no guilt, just confidence. As if I were a pawn to be maneuvered. As if my trust was an old shirt they could wear whenever they wanted. In the quiet that followed, I stood at my printer and made 3 copies of the still frame. Malis's smile, Gannon's nod, my pen in motion. I slid the photos into a new folder and labeled it with a thick black marker. If they push. I sat at the table, folder in hand, and thought about Reuben. What would he have done? He'd been a gentleman, but not a fool. He once told me, "People don't steal from strangers. They steal from the ones who won't fight back." I wasn't done yet. As I filed the folder into my safe, my phone buzzed on the counter. I picked it up and read the message on the screen. It was from Malis. "Hey, can we drop by tomorrow? Gannon said you had something for us to sign." I should have trusted my gut the moment I read Malis's text. She'd written, "We'd love for you to join us this weekend. It's a small dinner for Mom's birthday, nothing formal." But it was never nothing with her. With Malis, every gathering had a photo op, a sponsor, or at least a hashtag. Still, I said yes. Maybe a part of me wanted to believe I still had a seat at their table, even if it was one they kept trying to fold away. The event was at a country club in North Austin. Marble floors, twinkling chandeliers. The kind of place where you wear perfume you can't pronounce and smile like your face isn't tired. I hadn't been there since Ruben's company held a retirement brunch for one of his partners. Back then, people greeted me by name. That night, when I arrived, I walked to the table of place cards, expecting to see Altha Blake in neat script. Instead, my card read, "Guest of Mr. Gannon Blake." Just like that, reduced from mother to accessory. Everyone else had been assigned thoughtful labels. Grandma Jean, Auntie Charlotte, Pop Pop Joe. Their names glittered in gold print, nestled in mini silver frames. Mine was a paper rectangle, generic, disposable. I found my seat and sat down without saying a word. Dinner moved forward with forced elegance. Malis floated between tables like she was running for office, tossing compliments and squeezing shoulders. Gannon stuck close to her, smiling like he belonged in a toothpaste ad. The speeches started with the clink of a fork on a champagne glass. Milas's younger brother stood to introduce her, gushing about her business success and community contributions. Then Malis herself took the mic, beaming. "I just want to thank everyone who's helped build our family's legacy," she said, gesturing broadly. "My amazing mom and dad, our friends who've supported us through everything, my clients who became family." Her voice quivered with faux emotion. "You've all shaped who I am today." There was no mention of me, not a nod, not a glance. Gannon sat silently beside her, smiling at her words like they were carved into stone. Around me, people began to look at me differently, like they were trying to remember who I was, whether I was staff or just someone who wandered in off the street. A few smiled, unsure. One woman leaned over and whispered, "You must be one of the cousins." I nodded. It was easier than explaining who I used to be. After dinner, I stepped outside to the terrace, needing air. The stars hung low over the golf course, but I didn't look up. I just stared at the concrete under my feet. Eventually, I went back inside and found Gannon standing near the bar. I took him gently by the elbow and steered him to the hallway near the restrooms, away from the curated spotlight Milas always sought. "Is this a joke?" I asked, holding up my place card. "Guest of? Legacy? You let them erase me in front of everyone." He rubbed the back of his neck. "It's not that serious, Mom. You always overreact to this kind of stuff." I wanted to scream. Instead, I lowered my voice. "You let them write me out of my own family." Milas appeared as if summoned by tension. "We didn't mean anything by it," she said, tilting her head. "We just didn't want to confuse anyone, you know? It's branding. Consistency in presentation. Branding." She was talking about our family like it was a boutique skincare line. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say that wouldn't burn everything down. I walked away. No one followed. Outside, I sat near the decorative pond and let the wind press my hair flat against my scalp. I watched the reflection of the ballroom lights dance on the water and whispered to myself, "They've rewritten the family, and I'm not in the story." I pulled out my phone and sent a text to Lowell. "We need to start documenting everything. No more grace." I stayed until most of the cars had gone, then drove home slowly. The radio was off. The silence was louder. As I turned into my street, my phone buzzed in the passenger seat. I glanced at the screen. A tag notification. Blake Family Legacy Dinner, followed by sparkling emojis and hearts. I opened the album. Photo after photo, Malis laughing, Gannon pouring wine, guests clapping, children twirling. I wasn't in a single one. The night after the dinner, I couldn't stop scrolling through the photos. Every image Milas had posted glowed with curated perfection. Soft lighting, clinking glasses, smiling guests. My son beside her, his arm wrapped around her waist like a ribbon sealing a gift. The captions made my stomach turn. Blake Legacy Dinner, building the future, grateful for the journey. Not a single one included me. Not even a blurry background glimpse. It was as though I'd been edited out completely. By morning, a different ache settled in my chest. Less sadness, more suspicion. I couldn't explain it, not fully, but something pulled at me. I needed to see the rental house, the one Ruben and I bought right after Gannon was born. It was supposed to be part of our future, our safety net, our family's anchor. I hadn't driven by in months. That morning, I couldn't ignore the urge. The cul-de-sac was still quiet, the same trimmed lawns and kids' bikes in driveways. But my breath caught before I turned into the familiar drive. A red and white sign stood tall in the yard. Sold! I pulled over, parked, and sat gripping the steering wheel. The paint on the front door had been changed from pale blue to stark gray. The curtains were gone. The porch swing Ruben installed for Juno was missing. I called the property management company. A receptionist answered cheerfully. Yes, closing went smoothly. We're just finalizing the tenant transition paperwork. What do you mean? I asked. There was no sale. There was a pause. Malis Blake signed with full POA documentation. Everything looked in order on our end, ma'am. My mouth went dry. I didn't authorize any sale. That property wasn't hers to touch. I'm sorry, the woman said, her tone suddenly formal. Perhaps you should reach out to your attorney. I stepped out of the car. My legs moved stiffly as I walked toward the house, the one that used to smell like fresh paint and carpet glue. I tried my key in the front door. It didn't turn. I tried again. No luck. I walked around back. Through the kitchen window, I saw empty countertops and bare walls. But one thing caught my eye. On the island sat a thick, glossy flyer with gold accents. The headline read, Sold by Malis Blake Realty. I took a photo with my phone. My hand didn't shake from age. It trembled from the weight of betrayal. Back home, I didn't cry. I opened my laptop and logged into Facebook, unsure why. That's when I saw the video. It had been posted an hour ago. Building our legacy, brick by brick. The thumbnail was a slow pan of the house I'd just visited. My house, set to soft piano music. The video cut to Malis, holding a pair of keys, her face aglow. Gannon kissed her temple, beaming like they'd just bought their first home. Clips of them laughing, walking through the empty living room, spinning around in the backyard I used to weed. Our journey, our success. There was no mention of me, no acknowledgement that the house had belonged to Ruben, that it was supposed to be part of Juno's future. I stared at the screen until my jaw clenched. I typed a comment. You didn't build this. You stole it. But I didn't post it. I deleted the comment and opened my email. Lowell picked up on the first ring. Altha? I need everything under my name, I said. Deeds, trusts, bank accounts, anything they could have touched. He didn't hesitate. I've already started compiling it, and you're not alone in this anymore. I nodded, even though he couldn't see. For the first time in weeks, I believed it. I ended the call and stood there for a moment, the phone still in my hand. A ping drew my attention. New email. Subject, Transfer of Assets Confirmed, Blake Holdings, LLC. The body of the message was brief. A PDF attached, confirming transfer of 2 properties and associated rights. They weren't even hiding it anymore. The invoice from Blake Holdings stared back at me like a dare. I printed it out, punched holes in the margin, and slid it into the growing binder labeled Evidence. The fog I'd been living in wasn't just lifting. It had burned off entirely. Numbers, dates, notary stamps, filing codes, all of it clear now. My anger had shape. It had paperwork. By noon, I was in Lowell's office with a stack of folders in my arms. I hadn't carried that much weight since Gannon was in middle school, lugging science fair projects in and out of the car. Lowell's assistant offered to help, but I waved her off. I need to go through these myself. We spent hours combing through everything I'd signed in the last 3 years. Home repairs, insurance renewals, charity forms. Then I pulled out one manila folder and placed it gently in front of him. This, I said, tapping the corner, is the one they smiled through. Lowell opened it. His eyes moved down the page, then stopped. This clause here. Malis is listed as a trustee, Retroactively. I clenched my jaw. Meaning. Meaning she can act on your behalf, legally, starting from any point in the past that they claim was agreed upon. He turned to the next page. And this? Your address? They used it as the registered office for their LLC, without your consent. I let out a breath. They turned my home into their headquarters. Lowell looked up at me. They didn't just cross a line. They built a highway over it. I didn't flinch. Then let's make it a toll road. That night, back in my kitchen, I laid everything out across the table. Years of financial records, family documents, old wills. I wasn't a mother in that moment. I was an analyst. I drew lines with colored pens, marked dates on a timeline, traced signatures and compared strokes. It was a habit from my accounting days. When the numbers didn't add up, go back to the first entry and start again. They didn't want a slice of my life. They wanted the whole damn pie, and they wanted me to serve it with a thank you note. 2 days later, I invited Gannon and Melas to brunch. I picked a neutral cafe, public enough to keep voices down, quiet enough to hear the truth. Melas wore a cream blazer and full makeup, like she was heading to a networking event. Gannon looked tired, his collar wrinkled. We exchanged greetings stiffly, then I placed a thick envelope on the table. I thought we were meeting to clear the air, Melas said, smiling. We are, I replied, by shining some light on it. She reached for the folder. I stopped her. I'm going to walk you through it, I said, voice calm. One by one, I laid out copies of the documents, highlighted lines, signatures, property transfers, the care agreement clause, the invoice from Blake Holdings. These signatures, these clauses, do you think I forgot how to read? Or just that I wouldn't bother? Gannon didn't meet my eyes. Melas tilted her head. Altha, this is all a misunderstanding. Legal language is so dense. It's easy to get mixed up. Don't insult me, I said sharply. I built spreadsheets in my sleep while raising a child alone and balancing 2 part-time jobs. I didn't get confused. I got betrayed. Gannon shifted in his seat. We just thought it would make things easier. For when you need help. You mean for when I'm not around, I corrected. For when it's convenient that I vanish. Melas leaned forward, her voice still sugary. Altha, we're family. No, I said, standing slowly. You made it clear. We're business, and bad business ends in court. I didn't slam the folder shut. I didn't raise my voice. I left them there, still pretending the world hadn't changed in the past 30 minutes. At home, I locked the documents back into my safe. Not because I was scared, but because I was ready. I did cry. Later, quietly. Not because of the lies, but because it hurt to say those things to my son. But even through the tears, I whispered to myself, this time, it's on my terms. The house was dark by the time I turned in. As I reached to switch off the lamp, I noticed something through the curtain. Headlights. A car idled across the street. It didn't belong to any of my neighbors. I peeked through the blinds. The driver didn't move. A moment later, a sharp white flash lit the driveway. A camera? I didn't sleep well after the camera flash. In the morning, I stepped out in my slippers and noticed faint tire tracks across my driveway, curving too close to the hedges. The soil was freshly disturbed. Someone had sat there, watching my house, and hadn't cared to hide it. I needed air, and more than that, I needed answers. There were still a few of Reuben's tools in the shed at the old family house. His wrench set, his grandfather's drill press. I'd left them behind, thinking I had time. I drove across town with a dull buzz in my ears, trying not to let my mind race too far ahead of me. When I arrived, the house looked sterile. White blinds drawn, mulch perfectly placed along the walkway. I stepped up to the front door and slid my key in. It didn't turn. I pulled it out and tried again. Same result. A voice behind me cut through the stillness. I thought they told you. I turned to see Mr. Ferguson, the neighbor from 2 doors down. He was walking his little dog, the one that used to bark whenever Juno visited. "Excuse me?" I asked. "Your son said he was changing the locks last week, said you'd approved it." I stared at him. I didn't. He gave me a look of sympathy, but not surprise. "They told the HOA you'd moved to a nursing condo in Round Rock. Figured it was best to let them manage things." I swallowed hard. "I'm managing just fine." I got back in the car, gripped the wheel, and counted backward from 10. Then 20. Then 30. Back at home, I sat in the driveway, stared through my windshield, and pulled out my phone. Gannon didn't answer. Neither did Malis. I left a message. "I hope you're proud of yourselves," I said evenly, "because the next call will be from my attorney." I hung up, drove to a nearby strip mall, and sat in the parking lot of a coffee shop until I could trust my hands not to shake. Eventually, I checked my calendar. I had promised Juno's teacher I'd help out at the library that afternoon, reorganizing shelves, reading to the younger kids. When I arrived, the principal smiled. "Always a pleasure to have you, Miss Blake." I nodded and went inside. The scent of glue and book paper calmed me more than it should have. I lost myself in straightening rows of storybooks, spacing out titles, tightening dust jackets. Then I heard her voice. "Grandma?" I turned. Juno stood with her teacher, holding a small tote bag. Her forehead scrunched. "Are you still my grandma?" I blinked. "Of course, baby." She looked down. "Mommy said you don't live in our family anymore." My knees softened. I bent low, held her hands gently. "Listen to me," I whispered. "No matter what anyone says, I will always be your grandma. You hear me?" She nodded, then hugged me tightly around the waist. I blinked hard, kept the tears tucked behind my ribs. That night, I didn't cry. I got to work. I cleared my dining table, laid out all my paperwork, wills, trust revisions, property deeds, mail forwarding documents. I opened my laptop and drafted an email to Lowell. "Let's begin formal asset separation. I want everything frozen until reviewed. Every account, every deed, every signature. I'm not waiting anymore." I clicked send. Then I poured myself a glass of water, rinsed my face, and walked to the front door to double-check the lock. When I opened it, something crinkled beneath my feet. An envelope, no return address. I brought it inside, peeled it open, and unfolded a single sheet of legal paper. It read, "Effective immediately, cease and desist all direct communication with Gannon and Malis Blake. Continued contact will be construed as harassment and reported accordingly." Signed, Wallace and Price, attorneys at law. So that was it. They weren't even pretending anymore. The cease and desist letter sat folded on my dining table, but I didn't bother touching it again. My name was typed in bold, followed by threats dressed in legal jargon. It didn't scare me. It confirmed what I already knew. They were done pretending. And so was I. That week, I booked a private dining room at a small Italian restaurant tucked away in South Austin. Ruben used to bring me there on special occasions, back when things like anniversaries still meant something. The manager remembered me. He asked if we were celebrating. I told him no. Sunday came fast. I wore a dark blouse Ruben always said made me look 10 years younger. I didn't smile when I looked in the mirror. I wasn't dressing to impress. I was dressing to stand my ground. Everyone showed up. Gannon, Malis, Juno, in a pale yellow dress. Even Malis's parents, who had no idea what they were walking into. I waited until the waitress left our table before reaching into my bag and placing a thick envelope in the center of the table. Gannon eyed it cautiously. Malis offered a polite smile, the kind she used for networking events. "Is this about the letter?" she asked. "No," I replied. "This is about what came before the letter." I pulled out 2 photographs. One was a framed picture of Ruben and me from our 30th anniversary. He had one arm around my waist, the other holding up a glass of wine. The second was a digital printout from a promotional video Malis posted online last month. In that version, Ruben's face had been subtly altered, his wrinkles smoothed, his jawline sharpened. I barely recognized him. They took my husband's face, I said calmly, setting both pictures side by side. They replaced our memories with marketable ones. The room went silent. Gannon leaned back. Malis raised an eyebrow. It was just touched up, she said. Marketing uses enhancement tools. It's standard. Don't insult us, I snapped. You erased the man who helped raise you when your own father didn't show up. You used him as a prop, then distorted him. I pulled out a second item. A letter, neatly folded, cream-colored paper, with blue cursive ink. I found this in a keepsake box, I said. Allegedly written by Reuben, praising Malis, referring to her as the daughter we never had. I held up a handwriting sample from an old birthday card Reuben had written me and placed them side by side. He never used this kind of stationery, I added, and Reuben never called her that. Malis didn't say anything. Gannon looked down at his plate. Her parents glanced at each other, confused but unwilling to interfere. I leaned forward. No one is denying this? Not even a denial, just silence? Still nothing. I looked at my son. You used to come home from school with scraped knees and cry into my lap. I took out loans to send you to college, and now you stand beside someone who's rewriting our history while you sit there like a stranger? He swallowed but said nothing. I glanced at Milas. You turned this family into your brand. You turned my husband's legacy into a slogan. Milas's lips parted, but she didn't speak. I think she realized nothing she could say would make her look less guilty. I sat back in my chair, folded my hands neatly in my lap, and asked the only question left that mattered. Am I still your mother? Nobody answered. The clinking of forks had stopped. The hum of conversation from other tables seemed miles away. Juno shifted in her seat, glancing nervously between faces. Then, without a word, she stood up, walked around the table, and wrapped her arms around me. You're mine, she whispered. I rested my hand gently on her back. The room was too quiet for comfort now. I kissed the top of her head, stood slowly, and looked at every adult at that table. Enjoy the rest of your lunch, I said. It's the last one I'll attend. I didn't look back as I left. The sky outside had darkened with clouds, but the breeze was steady. By the time I reached home, I felt lighter. Not free, but clearer. A small package waited on my doorstep. No return address. I brought it inside, opened it carefully, and found a single USB drive tucked into a plain envelope. A sticky note was folded around it. In Reuben's unmistakable handwriting, it read, Trust no one. The USB sat in my palm like it weighed 10 pounds. I stared at it for a long time before walking into the living room, plugging it into my laptop, and sitting back with my arms folded. A file popped open immediately, just one. A video labeled Alpha Final. I clicked play. There he was. Reuben, sitting in his old flannel shirt, glasses slipping halfway down his nose, filmed at the desk we'd shared for 20 years. My breath caught. He looked tired but clear-eyed. If you're seeing this, he said, it means they pushed too far. He paused, ran a hand down his jaw. I didn't want to believe it at first, but Gannon's changed, and Malis, she's not who she pretended to be. I've been watching, and I've made copies. If anything happens to me, or if you feel unsure, you'll find everything under the file called Trust Lock. Use it, and Altha. He looked straight into the camera, voice softening. You were always the stronger one. Finish what we built. Protect it. The video ended, leaving my screen blank and my heart racing. I opened the file labeled Trust Lock. There it was. The original will, notarized, signed by both Reuben and me. Dated, stamped, legally sound. Right below it, a scanned email from Gannon to Reuben. The subject line read, Malis's access. The message was short. Maybe we should reconsider giving her more power over the assets. She's already handling a lot. And then another document, Reuben's signed legal statement, drafted before his passing, declaring that no changes to the will could be executed without my explicit co-signature. I sat frozen. Then I called Lowell. He picked up after the second ring. "I was just thinking about you." "I have something," I said. "It's not just big, it's the whole damn case." I sent the documents. 10 minutes later, my phone rang again. "This makes everything they did not just wrong," Lowell said, "but legally invalid. Altha, this is checkmate." The next morning, I drove to the old family home. My name might have been stripped off the mailbox, but I still knew every crack in the driveway. A man in a navy jacket was standing by the gate, holding a clipboard. "You're here to see the property?" he asked. "I just bought it from a woman named Malis Blake." I stepped forward. "I didn't authorize that sale, and neither did the legal owner." He blinked. "Excuse me?" I handed him a folder with a printed copy of the will and Ruben's legal declaration. "This house is still mine. Everything she told you was fraudulent." He read the documents in silence. I need to talk to my lawyer," he mumbled. "Please do. And until then, I suggest you don't unpack a single box." I turned and walked away without waiting for his reply. That night, I sat down at the kitchen table and wrote out a formal lawsuit with Lowell's help. Property theft, financial manipulation, elder fraud. He filed it the next morning. Then I opened Facebook, not to scroll, not to stew, but to speak. I typed a post and hit publish. I may be quiet, but I remember everything, and I never signed anything. The reaction was instant. Dozens of messages. Some from old coworkers, others from neighbors who had suspected but never asked. One said, "I knew something was off." Another, "You're brave for standing up." And then came the comment I expected. Malis, from her personal profile. "If she wants war, she's going to get it." I stared at the screen. For the first time in weeks, I let a small smile curve my lips. "Good," I said out loud, "because I've already won." Milas never responded to my last post again. Not with another comment, not with another threat. Just silence. And that, in its own way, said more than anything she could have typed. It was over. Or maybe it had never really begun the way she pretended. A few weeks passed in a haze of meetings, filings, hearings. Lowell was meticulous, guiding every step like a surgeon. The courts moved faster than I expected. The judge issued an order dissolving all assets under Blake Holdings tied to my name. The house, my house, was officially returned. The fraudulent sale was reversed, and the buyer, embarrassed and livid, filed a private suit against Malis for misrepresentation. Gannon didn't show up in court. No phone call, no apology, nothing. When the judge asked if he intended to appear or submit a statement, his lawyer simply shook his head. The judge leaned back and said, "Sometimes silence speaks the truth." Outside the courthouse, I didn't smile. But I did breathe deeper. The kind of breath that fills your lungs after weeks of holding everything in. Back home, I unpacked the boxes they never expected me to see again. My wedding album, Ruben's cufflinks, a yellowing drawing Juno made of the three of us under a tree. I hung it back on the wall beside the dining room mirror. My lease disappeared from social media shortly after the ruling. Her Instagram went blank, and friends she once curated like brand partnerships stopped tagging her. I noticed mutual acquaintances quietly slipping away. No comments, no likes, just distance. Gannon texted me a week later. "I didn't know it would go this far." I didn't respond. Juno was allowed to visit every other Sunday. Court-mandated, supervised. The first visit was awkward. She walked in holding a small notebook and a toy dragon. By the second visit, she brought a plant for my kitchen window. By the third, she asked if she could sleep over. I didn't let what happened taint her. She was the only one who had ever answered me. On a quiet Wednesday, I attended a seminar at the local library on elder financial abuse. I didn't register under my real name, just Marie. The room was filled with women like me, some older, some younger, all carrying stories in their shoulders. When the moderator asked if anyone wanted to share, I raised my hand. I didn't mention Ruben. I didn't mention Gannon or Malise. I just said, sometimes the people you trust the most write you out of your own life. And if you don't stop them, you'll start believing you were never part of it to begin with. Afterward, a woman pulled me aside. Tears in her eyes, she hugged me tight and whispered, "You saved my sister." I didn't feel heroic, but I felt steady, like I had both feet on the ground again. That weekend, while pruning my garden, I found the wind chime Reuben had given me on our 20th anniversary. It had been packed away in one of the boxes they'd shoved into storage. I cleaned it, untangled the cords, and hung it on the porch again. When the wind picked up, the sound wasn't loud. It was soft, clear, familiar. Some damage doesn't get undone, but it stops being loud. In my kitchen, I hung one last thing. A photo of me, Juno, and Reuben. Untouched, unedited, unposed. Just the three of us in the backyard, barefoot, laughing at something long forgotten. Beneath it, I wrote, "Truth doesn't need edits." In the end, this wasn't just about wills, houses, or even betrayal. It was about reclaiming my voice after being silenced in my own family's story. I learned that no one hands you dignity. You have to take it back, inch by inch, even when your heart is breaking. If someone's rewriting your life without your permission, you have every right to pick up the pen again. So let me ask you, have you ever been made to feel invisible by the very people who should have had your back? Have you been erased from your own family's narrative? Drop a comment and tell me your thoughts. Type 1 if this story touched your heart, or let me know where you're watching from. And if it didn't speak to you, tell me why. I'm listening. If you found strength in this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next one. Your support helps these voices be heard and remembered.